Interesting. So from the perspective that you give, the concept of a mirage, an illusion, we're hearing that there are those who basically are becoming atheists. There are Muslims who are actually becoming atheists.
Yeah.
So Hamza, what would you say would be probably some of the most common reasons why somebody would go through some kind of episode in their life where they would actually think to themselves, you know, there is some doubt in this particular faith of Islam, and therefore I can see that there is a lot of evidence, or there is something there that which is very visible. I mean, just like you've explained that this is a mirage, but to them it's something very real.
Yeah.
And they then decide to become atheists or not to believe in God anymore. Why do you think these people are going through this particular journey?
Well, it's anecdotal evidence, and I can only speak from my limited experience. But the first thing to point out is this: is that if someone has had enough interaction with the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they've had a basic level of connection with Allah, and they become an atheist, that person is not an atheist for intellectual reasons. 100% is an atheist because of two main reasons: kibr and hawa. Kibr meaning arrogance and desires, okay? And I've seen this so many times. I travel the world and I speak to a lot of Muslims who become atheists, and basically when we speak for about 5 or 6 hours about intellectual arguments, at the end of the day, what comes out and what they admit is that, you know, I just want to live this life. It has nothing to do with intellectual discourse. And I've seen this so many times. And for me, I'm grateful for those experiences, because Allah has given me those experiences to show to me, look, fundamentally, if someone has had a basic level of understanding of Islam, they've had a basic connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if they've left, then it's about kibr and desires. Now, that's one aspect. However, notwithstanding that, it's also very important to understand that a lot of the Muslims that decide to be skeptical or atheists, or they're really unsure about what to do in terms of how they're going to lead their lives and what ideas to adopt, many of those, unfortunately, have come from a background where Islam has not been taught at home. Islam was more like an ethno-religious identity. Islam, you know, people didn't know who Allah is. You know, I went to Pakistan a few years ago. I had people crying because they never knew that Allah will forgive them, right? You know, basic understanding of Allah's names and attributes and who Allah is and how to connect to Him, a basic understanding of the usuluddin. So, unfortunately, a lot of our youth, particularly in the West, they're brought up by maybe, you know, first generation or migrant families that, generally speaking, may have not had a really good grasp of the Islamic tradition, and there was a construct at home that people didn't even know what Islam was about. So a lot of those people, they leave Islam because they don't know Islam. There's another group of Muslims who basically leave Islam because it's more of a psychological phenomenon. It's psychodynamic. I remember meeting a Muslim in my town, and he said he's an atheist, so he's an ex-Muslim. And the reason he said he was an ex-Muslim, because of his parents, because his parents brought him up in this kind of what I would call a socially dark world, a spiritually dark world. You know, there was no rahmah, there was no muhabba, there was no mercy and love. So we also have to understand that it's multi-causal. It is multi-causal. So that's why I had to make the first principle in the beginning, that if people have a connection with Allah, they've had a basic connection with Allah, and they basically have a basic understanding of the religion. If they've left Islam, my view is it's because of kibr, arrogance, and it's because of hawa, desires. And there are other elements, which is basically the social element. You know, we need to basically refine our understanding of Islam, start adopting the Quran and Sunnah and internalizing in our lives, and that can manifest in our behaviors and our actions and our state of being. So it helps our children grow to have the correct Islamic shakhsiyah, the Islamic personality. And that's very important for us to consider as well, because sometimes we always point the finger, but I think we have to be balanced, that we also have to understand that we have something to address internally. And I know I've gone too long, but one more final point I want to make, which is we also have to understand that this is a political phenomenon. We live in a secular society. Secularism is really the political manifestation of atheism, and you have influential structures in society, such as the education system, such as the media, such as other constructs and influential pillars in society, and they're pushing that narrative. So if you're brought up within that, you know, arena, if you like, it's going to affect you in some way, because human beings are social beings, and generally speaking, human beings want certainty and they want to belong. In actual fact, the development of the social norm is as a result of us wanting to be certain and us wanting to belong. This is called informational social influence and normative social influence. So since human beings want to have certainty and human beings want to belong, if we're not giving that to them, this sense of belonging, this sense of certainty, they're going to find it outside. So that could be a problem too. And Allah knows best. These are just my limited insights.
Okay. Daniel, I can see that you're quite eager to get in there and present your side of why you think Muslims may be leaving Islam or going into atheism. Just before you do that, I just want to put an extra additional sort of component to this, and that is about a recent article that was made the claim that atheists on average are much more intelligent than people of faith. So just to add to that, what's your take on what Hamza just said?
Well, I agree with everything that Ustadh Hamza just said. I think that there are many reasons why you find Muslims finding disbelief more compelling for them personally. I think what we're seeing a lot of demographically is not people of religion turning to atheism per se or agnosticism. Rather, a lot of individuals are becoming what are considered non-affiliated or nons, in the sense of they don't feel religion speaks to them or speaks to their life. They don't find religion relevant. They don't necessarily deny that God exists, but they still feel that organized religion, and especially Islam, does not meet their needs for life. And so this is how they distance themselves from Islam. And I think that's like a very big phenomenon in the US, at least. The statistics show that about 1 in 4 Muslims who are raised as Muslims end up leaving Islam when they become adults, or they no longer identify as Muslims. So this is a big issue. And I think that what contributes to that kind of view of religion as being irrelevant is, again, due to some of these modern ideologies. When you are taught, and this might speak to this kind of question of intelligence or education, when you go through a school system from age 4 until you graduate from college, and you have an educational system that is predicated on this view that God does not exist, or at most we can't know for sure that God exists, and there's this conflict between reason and between rationality and Islam, or rationality and religion. When you go through an educational system like this, and it's not just in the West, even in the Muslim world, that the curriculum is in large part based on Western curriculum, where again the curriculum is based on these ideologies that at the center, at the core of it, is a denial of God and the truth of revelation. If you go through that, then of course, when you graduate or as you go through it, you're going to be less inclined to think that God exists. You're going to be less inclined to think that religion is relevant. If you are fed a kind of modern ideology, like liberalism, that says that you don't need religion to be a good person. You don't need religion to know what is right and wrong, what is good and bad. You don't need religion to understand how to organize society and to organize your family, to organize your life. Religion is superfluous at best, and at worst, it's an obstacle towards you achieving, true freedom and true equality and true rationality. If this is what is being hammered into the heads of Muslims, okay, even Muslims who are going to Islamic schools, in some places, the curriculum is still the same. It's still a Western curriculum, but you have it's garnished with Arabic or, some very basic Islamic theology. You're going to come out of it being very disillusioned. with religion. And even if you don't recognize it as disillusionment, you're disenchanted with Islam when you go through that. So I think this is what it affects everyone. This is in the water, so to speak, right? And so it just makes the Muslim community more likely to be convinced and find these kinds of atheistic arguments compelling, when in fact they're not compelling. And that's why we need to be able to do this work, this intellectual work of critiquing and deconstructing these ideologies in order to show people in general, not just Muslims, that look, you have to recognize the irrationality of rejecting God. You have to reject these ideologies because they lead to destruction, not only in the akhirah, but also in this life. And there are many arguments that can be made in that regard.
Okay.